This is Danny Bobrow, President of AIM Dental Marketing, welcoming you to this installment of the Practice Perfection Web-Based Education Series. Today's presentation is entitled, What You Don't Know Can Hurt You, Cybersecurity, the Master Lock for Your Dental Practice. Dr. Lorne Lavine, the digital dentist, has over 30 years invested in the dental and dental technology fields. He is a certified network and computer repair technician and a Hipaa certified security professional. He has extensive hands-on experience with most practice management and image management software, digital and intraoral cameras, computers, networks, and digital radiography systems. Lorne writes for many well-known industry publications and lectures across the country. He is the regular technology columnist for Dental Products Report and the former technology consultant for the Indian Health Service. As an attendee at today's event, you will understand what ransomware is and what it does, learn the statistics on how ransomware has affected the dental industry, master new technologies for dealing with ransomware, learn how Hipaa affects all of this, and develop a treatment plan to protect and secure your practice's critical data. Before we get started with today's event, I remind you that Practice Perfection webcasts run for around 90 minutes. While attendees are in listen-only mode, we invite you at any time to submit your questions or comments using the question button on your screen. We will allow time following the presentation to get your questions answered. If we do not get to your question during the webcast, we'll see that they're answered shortly thereafter. Attendance at this presentation entitles you to receive 1.5 hours of continuing education credit with the compliments of the digital dentist and AIM Dental Marketing. Shortly following the webcast, we will send you an email with instructions for receiving your CE, again, at no cost to you. Participants are cautioned about the dangers of incorporating techniques and procedures into their practice if the course has not provided them with adequate clinical experience to allow them to perform them competently. And now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome back to the Practice Perfection stage my good friend, Dr. Lorne Lavine. Hello, Lorne.
Hey, Danny. Thank you so much for having me on. You forgot to mention the part that I've known you for, I think, about 23 years now. Most of you on this call probably know that Danny runs the Dentist Climb for a Cause, and I was on the very first group that went out. And you really get to know somebody very well when you spend 3 nights in a tent with them, and we still manage to remain friends.
Still do. Well, we were only 14 at the time, right?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And many of you who may know a little bit about me know that I've been out there lecturing and writing for well over 20 years. And I've focused a lot in the past on general IT stuff, on computers and networking and backup. And we'll certainly touch on some of those things this evening. But it's almost impossible to open a newspaper or put on the news or go to your favorite news website and not hear about the latest ransomware attack about some major organization. And a lot of dental offices may not be aware of the fact that we really are pretty significant targets for this. So the goal for this evening is to give you some background, some statistics, try to answer as many questions as I can, both in the presentation and afterwards. I also have a few offers that I want to make at the end. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I was a practicing periodontist for 10 years. Shockingly, I did not love doing perio. It was not my cup of tea, but I love the technical aspects of dentistry. I started my practice in '92, and this was right around the time where people were starting to put computers in the operatories, and digital x-rays were just coming out and intraoral cameras were coming out. But this was long before the Shines and Pattersons and Caristreams of the world were involved. It was all individual companies, and with my background, my family has an electronics business. I had a knack of being able to get all these things to work together. And over the course of a number of years, I phased out of my practice, got into doing IT for dental offices, and that's what I've been doing exclusively since 2002. So the format for the webinar, we've already done an introduction. The way that I decided to structure the webinar is after an FAQ, frequently asked questions, because the questions that I'm going to try to answer this evening are ones that I get almost every day, either on Dental Town or people that email me or call up the office. So we're going to do that. I'm going to make some offers at the end, and then we definitely want to leave some time at the end to answer any questions that come up as well. So let's go through those FAQ, those frequently asked questions first, and then we'll get into the bulk of things. So one question I really want to answer tonight, of course, is we hear this term cybersecurity. Well, what does that mean? I'm going to answer that for you. What's ransomware? Unless you've been living under a very large rock, you hopefully know what ransomware is, but this is a huge issue in dentistry and healthcare and all across, in any industry. You just have to just look at the news. We'll talk about exactly what ransomware is. Hopefully very few of you have been affected so far. What about HIPAA? We talk about cybersecurity, and I think it's critical, but there's all kinds of HIPAA rules and regulations when it comes to securing and protecting your data. So what part does HIPAA play in all this? We'll try to touch on that as well. How do I protect my data? I mean, there's just so many things out there that you can and should be doing, and what's the right thing? And, it's no different than, a patient goes to 5 dentists, they're going to get 5 different treatment plans. Same thing in IT. If you go to 5 dental IT companies, they're going to give you different recommendations. But at the end of the day, you really want to try to figure out, well, how do I secure and protect my data? We're going to talk a little about firewalls. Well, what is a firewall, and what exactly does it do? 6, what is application whitelisting? We're going to get into this. To me, I've been doing this, as I said, for over 20 years. Application whitelisting is the biggest game changer I've seen when it comes to securing and protecting your practice from ransomware. We'll talk about what whitelisting is and ring fencing. This is better than any firewall, any antivirus software out there. It's definitely a game changer. We'll talk about what this is and how it can help your practice. How do you keep your systems up to date? You have multiple software programs that are running. They all need to be updated on a regular basis. That's a HIPAA law, by the way. It's called patch management, that you have to be updating your systems. We'll talk about that. How do you back up your data? There's so many different ways to back up the data. The big issue for a lot of practices isn't how do you back up the data, it's how quickly can I get up and running if my server goes down? And really that question should be measured in minutes, not in days, which is the way it is for most practices. Do I have to encrypt my data? And if so, how do I do that? I'll answer that question for you. And you hear about this term, risk assessment, risk evaluations, risk analysis. Do I have to do this? And what exactly is it? And we'll talk about that as well. So why do we worry about this stuff? Why is cybersecurity, why is HIPAA such a big deal? As I said, it's almost impossible to have not heard about some of these things because it was all over the place. There were 1,500 businesses that were affected by ransomware that hit an IT software company called Kaseya. A lot of us in IT use what's called RMM, Remote Management and Monitoring Software. It's basically saying remote access. But we use that software to patch systems and to be able to work with offices that are long distance. The software that controls that was actually hit by, and that's when they say 1,500 businesses, it's 1,500 IT providers. Each one of those providers has hundreds, if not thousands, of clients that they were monitoring that were also affected as well. But the estimation was that somewhere between 50,000 and 1 million different individual people, companies were hit with this particular ransomware attack. Most of you, especially if you're on the East Coast, you heard about the Colonial Pipeline. It caused a lot of gas shortages earlier in the summertime. And, when you actually read through the news, and I've highlighted here on the screen, it was the result of a single compromised password. All it takes is one person that's either giving the password away and getting money for it or accidentally has their password discovered. Once someone has a username and password, it's kind of game over. So it doesn't take much, and this was a multi-billion-dollar attack. If you think that dental offices are immune to this, well, the people in Wisconsin, the 400 offices that were hit a couple of years ago would probably argue that with you. There were 400 offices that were all hit at once. Not long after that, there was another 100 or so in Colorado. There was a few other, I don't have screenshots of it, in Seattle area, the Dallas area, a few hundred offices all hit around the same time as well. The reason that they were all hit concurrently is that these criminals figured out, well, let's say we want to hit 400 dental offices. We could try to somehow get those 400 offices to click on an email link or send them to a sketchy website or try to somehow do that. Or better yet, what if we could get into the portal that their IT company uses to manage those offices. Once you're in the portal, and all of us have these portals that we can access, my company, we've got well over 1,500 computers that we're managing at any one time. If someone were to get into the portal, they would have access to all 1,500 of those computers. They could push out any files they want, including ransomware. That's how those offices were hit, that the IT company didn't have best practices when it came to securing their portal. They weren't doing what we call two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, where it's not enough just to have a username and password, but you want them to send a code to your cell phone or to your email as well as a secondary code to get on. They didn't have that in place. That's why all those practices were hit. Just some statistics, and again, the goal here is not to scare you, but I think it's something that you really need to be aware of. Last year, first half of last year, ransomware accounted for 41% of all cyber insurance claims. And in the first half of 2020, there was a 260% increase in the frequency of ransomware attacks. Not surprisingly, first half of 2020, most of us probably remember, that's when everything was shut down. COVID hit, and by March, most of us were shut down for a few months. All of a sudden, you have people that still needed to access their computers, but they weren't in the office. They were accessing from home, where they didn't have the best security practices in place. And lo and behold, huge increase in cybersecurity incidents during that time. Other key findings, and I apologize that this is, the writing's a little bit small here, but this is talking about in 2021, 34%, so a third of all healthcare organizations were hit by ransomware in the last year. A third, that's a huge amount. 65%, so 2/3 that were hit in the last year said that they were, the people who were trying to get in succeeded in encrypting the data. Other important statistics here, on average, only 69% of the encrypted data was restored after the ransom was paid. So, when you pay the ransom, yes, there's always a chance that you're going to get, there's a good chance you're going to probably get the code, but on average, a third of that data, 31% of that data is unable to be recovered. So, you just got to pray that if we're talking about your practice management software, is it the file that contains your critical data, the .dat file, the data file? Is that one of the ones that was that you managed to get unencrypted? If not, you've lost your data. So, these are really, in my mind, important things to understand, that dental offices, healthcare organizations are definitely not immune to this. So, pearls of wisdom when it kind of comes to protecting and securing your data. There's no right, wrong, or best. I'm going to go over some things that I recommend that works for me. Listen, this is no different than what practitioners go through. You guys all use certain impression materials, certain implant systems, certain things that you do because they work well in your hands. Same thing for IT. Things I'm recommending are things that we've tested for decades that work for our clients. It doesn't mean that what I do is right and another IT company does is wrong. Or that what we're doing is the best. You have to try to figure out what's best for you. Don't put the cart before the horse. We have so many offices that we work with that call me up and say, hey, I really want to get up to date on cybersecurity and Hipaa compliance and all the different software systems, but they're still running Windows 7 computers, and they have a server 2008, and their hardware's 7, 8 years old, and they've kind of neglected the fact that they've got all this infrastructure that has to be upgraded alongside with it. Because of that, in real estate, they always say the three most important things are location, location, location. For me, when it comes to cybersecurity, Hipaa compliance, it's planning, planning, planning. There's nothing wrong with doing things in stages, having a game plan or a treatment plan of how you're going to incorporate that. It's just a matter of following that plan. As long as you've got a plan in place, you're not going to put the cart before the horse. You'll be able to hopefully protect and secure your information. So what is cybersecurity? We use this term a lot. It refers to all the technologies and processes and practices that are designed to protect networks, devices like computers, programs, and data from attack. Sometimes we use the term information technology security. It's basically security related to data that you have on your computer system. That's basically the best way to describe it. For most dental offices, we're talking about a number of things where cybersecurity is going to encompass. We definitely, and we'll talk about all these individually, about having a firewall, encryption, patching, anti-ransomware software, antivirus software, the application whitelisting and ring fencing that I talked about earlier, backup and disaster recovery, staff training, and risk assessment. These are all things that offices can and should be doing, and for the most part, there are HIPAA laws that say you have to do it. So it's not like you have a whole ton of options when it comes to this. What about ransomware? Again, we use that term a lot. Ransomware is a type of malware that basically prevents you from accessing your software, either by they like have a lock screen, or they actually individually lock the user files until you pay the ransom. Most modern ransomware, which is also called crypto ransomware, encrypts certain types of files, and basically if you don't pay the ransom, you don't get the decryption key. One thing that's really scary, I think, especially in the dental field, is that we're seeing a lot of examples of what we call double extortion and triple extortion. So let's say that you get hit with ransomware, but you realize, hey, I've got a really good backup, and again, we'll talk about the need for backup, but you say, I've got a good backup, everything's, it wasn't affected, I'm just going to restore that backup. Well, these criminals, if you're not going to pay, they say, you know what, okay, you don't want to pay us, that's fine. We're going to take all your patient data and we're going to put it online, which is not a good thing. It would be really bad, actually, for most practices. And if that's not enough to convince you to pay, and it would be for, I think, almost everyone on this call, then what they do is, a lot of cases, they actually have, a lot of times they copy that database and they can access the database. Now they have your patient information. They can threaten to start contacting the patients, which is definitely, I think all of us at that point would be more than happy to pay the ransom than have to go through that. That would be devastating for most practices. The trick, of course, is to make sure you never get ransomware in the first place. But typically what it looks like is you would wait, come into the office one day and there'd be a file like a pop-up on your screen that would say something like this, that your data's been locked. You have to use a special browser called a Tor browser. It's a secure browser, so it can't be tracked. They're going to ask for payment in Bitcoin or some type of cryptocurrency. They don't take checks. They don't take MasterCard. They don't take cash. You've got to pay an untraceable cryptocurrency as well. So this is not the type of pop-up that you want to see when you start your day. What are some of the consequences of ransomware? On average, and every practice is different, but the total number of days that an incident lasts is usually around a week. Typically a day or two for us to get data restored, another day or two to make sure we've gotten all the stuff off of there. But depending on what you've got in place, what type of backup you have, and how long it takes to restore that, it's not unusual to see 6 to 7 days of downtime in order to recover from a ransomware. This number, the 65,000 or so, the average cost of incident-related downtime, it's going to be different for every practice. If you've got a large group practice and you're hit, that's probably how much you're losing in a few hours, let alone in a week. But when you add in the cost of the ransom, potential legal issues that you have to deal with, having to get the ransomware off, recover from the backup, this is a pretty accurate number as well for a lot of practices. I think that's an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of people is all this information. And again, it's almost impossible to not hear about ransomware. This was a recent one with Accenture. It's happening on an almost daily basis. This is what I had talked about, what some of these companies will do if you don't pay the ransom. This is the secondary encryption, the double encryption, where they list the companies who didn't want to pay the ransom, and in a lot of cases they'll actually provide copies of their databases as well. So they're getting pretty aggressive when it comes to making sure that you pony up if you're hit with the ransomware. So we've talked a little bit about cybersecurity, but how does all of this tie in with HIPAA? One thing that I think is important to understand is, you have to answer the question, if you're hit with a ransomware virus, is that a breach? Do you have to record that as a breach? And, you don't have to type in your answers or not, but the answer is, it is true. I think a lot of dental practices aren't aware of that a ransomware is considered a breach. If for some reason you don't believe me, there's a document out there. You can do a Google search for HIPAA ransomware. It's from 2016. And they absolutely said that if you're hit with ransomware, you've suffered a breach. They do actually have 4 conditions where you would not necessarily have to declare a breach. Those are the 4 at the bottom here. I think I have it on the next page as well. The thing that's challenging with those 4 conditions is they don't tell you how many of these need to be true for you to be able to say, you know what, there's a low probability of compromise, so we don't have to declare a breach. My gut feeling is that all of these need to be true, but let's say half of them need to be true only. So let's look at those questions. The nature and extent of the protected health information, likelihood of re-identification. Well, if it's your practice management data, it absolutely can be re-identified. It has all the patient's name, date of birth, chart ID, everything's in there. So you have to answer no to that one. Do you know the person who the disclosure was made to? Nope, you don't know who the person is that hacked in and was able to get there. Do you know whether the patient information was viewed or not? Nope. So far you're 0 for 3. The only one that you'll probably be able to answer yes to is that you've been able to get the ransomware off of there. Usually, like I said, within a week or so that's done. But in my mind, if you're answering no to 3 of the 4 criteria, I don't think you're going to be able to make the argument that I don't have to declare a breach because there was very low probability of compromise. If you're compromised, you basically have to declare a breach. Unlike a lot of Hipaa, which is somewhat ambiguous, and there's certain types of rules that are kind of open to interpretation, in my experience, in my opinion, the breach notification is not one of those rules. It is very set in stone. And basically what happens is that if you get hit with ransomware, if you suffer any type of breach, there are 3 things by law that you have to do. Number 1, you have to notify the local news media. Number 2, you have to be listed on the Health and Human Services website. We call it the wall of shame. It's not a place you want to be. But the worst part is what's called individual notice. You have to notify every single patient of record in written form. So by mail, or email if they've agreed to getting emails from you. But basically it's mail, that you have suffered a breach, what information may have been compromised, and usually you're talking about social security numbers and date of birth and addresses and credit card information. It is not a letter that you want to send out. We've had a few offices that we've worked with in the past that have had to declare that breach. On average, they're losing maybe 15 to 20% of their patient population within a month. Because as you can imagine, it's just a horrible thing to have to send to a patient, and it's not something that your patients ever want to receive from you. So the way that I've kind of broken it down is to say, okay, well, we talked about these statistics and all the things that you need to be aware of when it comes to ransomware and cybersecurity. How do we approach dealing with it? So I kind of my 6-step plan here. First thing is, we want to keep the bad guys out. We want to make sure that people never get into your system in the first place. That is, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. That to me is that, it's worth more than an ounce there. Keep them out, and you don't have to worry about the next 5 things. However, that's not infallible. So if they are going to get in, we need to be able to deal with any of the malware, ransomware, viruses that get in. We want to make sure that if they do manage to get a hold of data that is encrypted data, that there's nothing they can really do with it without that decryption key. You want to make sure that you can recover from this, that if they do get in, that you want to basically be able to back up, to restore from a backup that you've got in place. You really want to have some type of cyber liability or breach insurance. We do it for all of our clients. We recommend starting at least $250,000. We've had lately there's been so many ransomware incidents. The insurance companies, the premiums have gone way up, but we have a number of our clients who are actually asking for $1 million of coverage. That insurance is going to cover you for everything: the cost of the ransom, losing patients, legal fees, HIPAA stuff, HIPAA audits, all the associated expenses with that. And finally, doing some type of risk assessment, making sure that even before you go in what the issues are. So let's look at those one at a time. How to keep the bad guys out. Number 1, firewalls and patching. To me, that is the best way to keep negative people from getting into your systems. We use this term of firewall. Well, what exactly is it? It's basically a network security device that monitors incoming and outgoing network traffic and it decides whether this traffic is good or bad and whether it should be allowed in based on rules that are set up in the firewall. These have been around forever. I mean, we've been using firewalls for 20, 25 years. There are different types of firewalls out there. When I talk about a firewall, I'm always talking about a hardware firewall. Yes, there are software firewalls. Many of the hardware firewalls actually have software inside them. They have antivirus or anti-ransomware software as a subscription you can get with it. But I'm always talking about a hardware firewall. You really want to make sure that you have what we call a business class firewall. I really don't recommend, and a lot of offices unfortunately have these, like consumer level or home use routers, Linksys, D-Link. They're okay, but I like other ones like Sophos and SonicWall. But you have to have a firewall in place. We talked about the breach notification rule. And one thing you want to do is to make sure your firewall is actually working. All of us in IT, or at least a lot of us in IT, one of the things that we offer for our clients is penetration testing, where we actually see, can we get through your firewall? Are there open ports? Can we get into your network? That's something you really should know, because if people can get in, you want to make sure you close off that hole as quickly as you can. So the one that we normally recommend for our clients is Sophos. Like I said, SonicWall is another good one as well. A good business class firewall. They're not cheap, but you shouldn't have to go crazy either. Somewhere in the $600 to $700 range. There are, Cisco has like $3,000, $5,000 enterprise level firewalls. You don't really need anything like that. I'm just suggesting that you stay away from like the $100 routers. There's nothing in the HIPAA rules that says you have to have one firewall versus another. But as with anything in life, you get what you pay for, and some firewalls are better than others. And for most dental offices, you want something that's at least better than what people have in their homes. Okay, another little short quiz here. HIPAA requires that you patch all your software on your computers on a regular basis. Well, I already kind of gave you the answer to that, but it is true. It's called patch management. And this is, again, this is a HIPAA law that you have to do this. So one thing that you want to do, this is the second way. Everyone understands that a common way that you can get a ransomware infection is by someone going to a website or opening up an email attachment. Email far and away is the number one reason that you get ransomware. Not as well known, but very common way that ransomware can get in is if you have an unpatched operating system or unpatched software. Every software out there has security holes in it. And those companies are constantly releasing patches to that. A lot of times the patches themselves have holes in it. You're kind of playing the game of whack-a-mole constantly with it. But you really want to make sure that you have secure systems and that they're patched. Any of you that had Windows 7 Server 2008 probably were contacted by your IT company before January of 2020, because that's when Microsoft not only ended support for those systems, they stopped patching them as well. And by HIPAA definition, if you have an unpatched operating system, you're not compliant. So, a lot of people were telling their clients, hey, you got to replace these computers or upgrade to Windows 10 or Server 2012 or later because of the fact that those patches had stopped. So you absolutely need to do this. However, no matter how good your firewall is, no matter how good and current your patching is, you can't necessarily stop a staff member or yourself accidentally from clicking an email that you shouldn't have, or copying a file that wasn't proper, or going to a website that isn't, it looks like it's a website that really isn't that website. You need to deal with that stuff that gets in. So number one, you need to have a constant updated virus and spyware protection. There are a lot of good programs out there. We use one called Nod32 by ESET. There's 10 Micro, there's Kaspersky. There's all these good programs that are out there. The challenge that I've seen is that even though a lot of these companies will tell you, hey, we do a good job against ransomware, in my experience, that's not really the case. So we're always going to recommend that you have some type of supplemental protection against ransomware specifically. So like I said, there's a lot of good antivirus programs out there. There's ESET, Avira. I never had good luck with Norton's at all. But the supplemental software for ransomware, there's some really good programs out there. This is the Intercept X is the one that we recommend for our clients. It's made by Sophos, the same company that does the firewalls. There's Hitman Pro, which I think may be owned by Sophos now as well. So they're getting a corner on the market. But You really want to have these supplemental programs. These are typically not horribly expensive software programs, somewhere around 40 to 50 bucks per computer per year to have really good protection. That being the case, the thing that a lot of offices are now facing is what we call zero-day infections. And what that means is the fancy term, but what it means is that a lot of the ransomware that is coming out is so new that your firewall, your antivirus, anti-ransomware software doesn't know that it's a ransomware virus. They just have never seen this program before. They don't know how to deal with it. So we really should have something in place to protect your software in case one of those viruses manages to get through. And the software that we use, we call Threat Block. It does a couple of things. It does application whitelisting and ring fencing. What is application whitelisting? It's basically a process of, we take an inventory of all the software that you have on your systems, under the assumption this is all good software. We take an inventory of that. We upload it to our website, where we also contain the data from all of our other clients as well. So we've got our 350 clients or so that we currently manage. We have data on all of those offices. That's all conflated together. We have it for every single program that you could ever imagine is on there. These are all considered good programs. Anything that's not on that list won't be able to run. It's literally stopped in its tracks. Ring fencing basically builds a fence around those applications. The best way I can describe ring fencing is if you have a practice management software, a lot of you probably use like third-party patient reminder systems like Yappy and Demand4, Solution Reach. And that's kind of an example of ring fencing where the makers of the practice management software have said, hey, we're going to allow certain applications to be able to access this data, but we're not going to allow other ones to do it. Ring fencing just takes that to a higher level. It basically says, hey, we're going to dictate which software programs can access your database, which ones can't. So it's just an extra layer of protection. So this graphic, I think, kind of explains the whole process, is that we scan the system to see the list of all the good software. That normally runs for about a week or two. We build what we call a whitelist. These are all what we consider to be trusted and safe applications. At a certain point, we flip the switch. All ransomware, all viruses are just tiny little programs. They're just a series of instructions. A ransomware virus would be a set of instructions that says, get onto the system, hide yourself, disable the antivirus program, encrypt the files, leave the ransom note, and get out of there. So it's a fairly simple program for the most part. But if it's not on that whitelist, because it's a program that's trying to run, the application whitelisting is going to say, well, hold on a second here. I don't know what that software is, so I need approval for that. And of course, you're not going to get it. If it is a good program, let's say you are an OpenDental user and you wanted to load the latest patch and the latest update to OpenDental, the very first person of our clients who goes to apply that update, it's going to say, well, hold on a second here. I don't recognize that software. Let's make sure that it's good. So you send us a request. We get the request. It takes us somewhere between 90 and 120 seconds on average to approve the software. At that point, you're good to go to install it. That's only for the person who's unlucky enough to be our first client that has that update. Once we have approved the software, it's applied to all of our clients. So once one person has it, anyone from that point onwards is not going to get that little pop-up that says, the request to run a new program. It's already been pre-approved. So, and it's pretty rare that we see these issues. So the third thing is you really want to lock it down with encryption. Encryption is a little bit misunderstood, and I think a lot of people don't understand why they need encryption. One of the reasons that we feel that there may be some misconceptions about encryption is that all HIPAA rules have two types of rules. There's required rules, which basically means that they have to be done, no ifs, ands, or buts, and there's what's called an addressable rule. Encryption falls under those addressable rules. Well, what does addressable mean? And the emphasis here is mine. A covered entity must implement an addressable implementation if it is reasonable and appropriate to do so, and must implement an equivalent alternative if the addressable implementation is unreasonable and inappropriate. Who gets to make that decision, whether it's reasonable and appropriate? Well, it's supposed to be you. You decide, hey, this is my practice. I'm going to decide if this HIPAA rule is reasonable and appropriate, and if not, I'm going to come up with some alternative, or I'm going to document why I think it's not reasonable and appropriate. Seems easy. So encryption is really up in the air, right? Well, here's the problem. Every version of Windows Server from 2012 onwards, Windows 10 and Windows 11, which just came out a few weeks ago, have a built-in encryption program called BitLocker. It's free. Now, you're probably going to pay an IT person to help you set it up if you haven't done this before, but the software itself, it's free. So you imagine going through that audit with a HIPAA auditor, and they say, hey, we noticed that you haven't encrypted your server. Why not? And you say, well, I just didn't think it was reasonable and appropriate. Good luck with that argument when they're going to say, well, but it's a free program that's already there. It's already built into your operating system. All you have to do is flip the switch and get it running. So it's not an argument I think you're going to win. So even though it is what we call an addressable implementation, it really is pretty much mandatory that you do that. If you're running software that doesn't have, for some reason you choose to run Windows 7, which again is not HIPAA compliant, or Server 2008, there are free programs like TrueCrypt and VeraCrypt, which you can also use to encrypt your software. So there's no excuse. There's really no excuse for not encrypting your data. There was a famous case out here in California a few years ago where a dentist had his server stolen. He was running Dentrix, and at the time he was under the misimpression that Dentrix encrypted their database, which wasn't 100% accurate. But you're kind of forgetting the fact that your practice management software is just one source of protected health information. You have images and QuickBooks and Invisalign and emails and Word documents and spreadsheets, and anything that has a patient name or date of birth or chart ID or anything like that, address, is considered electronic protected health information and has to be treated as such. So it wouldn't make a difference if your practice management software company tells you, hey, we encrypt our database. You don't have to worry about it and doing it yourself, because you have so many other sources of information that does need to be encrypted. So again, don't be fooled by that. What about backup? And again, there are just so many ways to back up. I could do a whole hour just on backup techniques. Hopefully there's none of you out there still using tape backup. We tried it, I think, for a few months back in like the 1990s. The problem with the tape backup is, of course, you need a tape drive to read it. Normally that tape drive is inserted in the server. So if your server goes down, you can't use the tape. I mean, it makes a great paperweight, but it's not much else. So for a while, we were using like rewritable CD-ROM drives and DVD drives. There are still a lot of offices using portable external hard drives. They come in all shapes and sizes. They're okay. They get the job done. They can have, you can get them with multi-terabytes worth of storage. So certainly you can get a 3-4 terabyte drive for under $100. I mean, they're not expensive. The problem, of course, is that it really requires a lot of effort on your part to do that backup. There are all kinds of backup programs out there. This is one we used to recommend forever called Karen's Replicator. It's a free program. Well, it's free if you use it at home. It's like $29 or $39 if you use it in office. The woman who wrote it, Karen, she passed away about 7 or 8 years ago, so I'm not sure if they're even still charging for it or not. There's other more sophisticated programs like ThinkBack Pro. So there's a wide range of software programs out there. I have become a huge fan of online or cloud storage as a secondary source of backup. You really want to have the backup out of the office. And yes, you could do it on an external hard drive as long as you are religious about running that backup and taking it out of the office every single night. Most offices that we work with aren't. They're busy because they have enough things to worry about. They don't know if they've actually even done the backup correctly because they don't check it, they don't verify it. And again, these are all HIPAA rules. You have to check and verify your backup. You have to do test restores, and most offices don't do that. So, it can be offsite as well. But the beauty of online backup is that it's out of the office, it's secure, and it's an automated process where you don't need to worry about it. Ideally, and again, I don't want to sound self-serving, but you really want an IT company handling this for you. If you don't know what you're doing or how to check it or how to verify it or how to run test restores, it's better off in the hands of someone that does this on a daily basis. Key things to look for if you're evaluating these types of systems: Make sure that it's HIPAA compliant. You don't want to use a company that only has one server. You want there to be multiple servers all spread out around the country. You want them to be able to copy open databases. Ideally, you want to close your practice management software at the end of the day so that the backup can run, but a lot of times people forget to do that, so you want a software that can handle that. You want multiple days, weeks, months of your backup that you can restore from if need be. You want to be able to restore both the entire server as well as single files, and again, you want this to be an automated process. We have one that we use for our clients called Data Protect. There's all kinds of programs out there. I tend to not be a huge fan of some of the big ones that you would read about. If you do like a web search, you'll hear about ones like Mozy or Carbonite. They're okay, but they don't. A lot of them aren't HIPAA compliant. A lot of them, they're an online only, so you'll be waiting days to get your data downloaded or to have them send an external drive to you. So ideally, what you want to do is have two backups. One thing to keep in mind is that if you have a server that has mirrored hard drives, called a RAID server, which we recommend for every office, and have been doing this for 20 years, that is not a backup. That's redundancy. That is not going to help you if there's a flood or a fire or theft or anything like that. You want to have an offsite backup. It can be an external hard drive or online, but you also want to have an emergency server that basically acts like an exact duplicate of your server. We call it an image, where it's not just the data, but it's the program files, the settings. It literally is a copy of the server. You don't need to put this on another full server. What we normally do is put it on like a souped up Dell computer that's got a lot of hard drive space so that we can put a number of backups on there. But that's a virtual copy of the server. Your server goes down for whatever reason, we fire up that virtual copy of the server, you're up and running in minutes. Your downtime should not be measured in days. We've had the occasional time where that happens for various reasons. Backups are not 100%, even though IT companies will tell you, oh yes, we've never had a problem with that. That's hogwash. Most of our backup restores do take a few minutes, up to an hour or two, but there are complications sometimes, and sometimes it takes multiple days to get everything completely restored. We always work on getting the practice management software restored first so that you can be functional, and then getting all the old images restored, because that's usually much more data and takes longer to restore. I definitely recommend some type of cyber liability insurance. There's all kinds of programs out there. As I said, the one that we recommend for our clients, we get it through Chubb. There's other providers out there, but look for at least $250,000. If you had looked at it a few years ago, you're going to have a little bit of sticker shock because there's been so many ransomware attacks. The premiums have gone up exponentially. My premium for my business went up threefold between 2019 and 2020. Most of you, if you'd looked at a few years ago, you're paying close to double what it would have been. We used to see policies that were $400 or $500 a year. Now most of our clients are getting policies that are between $1,000 and $1,500. So it's still not horrible compared to the cost of how what you'd have to lose in having to go through an audit and all the stuff associated with a breach. But it's still obviously it's a hit financially. What about a risk assessment? Is this something that you have to do? Well, the answer is yes. If you look here, it's section 164.308. And unlike some of those other ones that are addressable, risk analysis, which is number 2A there, is required. You have to do a risk assessment on a regular basis. They don't really define regular. We highly recommend that you do it on a yearly basis. We actually have a number of clients that want to do it every 3 or 4 months just to keep them going on resolving all the issues that we find. But you do need to do a risk assessment on a regular basis. How do you do it? Well, that's the challenge. Because what you saw there, that risk analysis, that line, when it comes to HIPAA guidelines for how to do a risk assessment, that is it. It's literally that one sentence there. There's no guidelines. That being the case, there is an organization called NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They released a report. It's the NIST publication 800-30, Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments. It's 95 pages long. If any of you suffer from insomnia, this is a great cure because 2 pages in, you'll be out. It is very dry reading, but I can give you the highlights because it's something you already know. A new patient shows up for your practice. You don't just start treating them. I mean, I hope you don't. You take radiographs. You do your perio probing, your restorative charting. You take your medical and dental histories. intraoral, extraoral exams. And based on all of that, you put together a treatment plan. Same thing with HIPAA and cybersecurity. You have to do a thorough evaluation. You got to look at it from an administrative standpoint. Do you have policies and procedures? Do you have incident response forms? Look at it from a physical standpoint. Do you have locks on the doors? What do you do with the paper charts? Do you have a video surveillance system? Things like that. And the one that's, the kicker is the security part, which is all electronic data. One of my pet peeves, and this, if anyone's on this call that works for one of these companies, I apologize, but there were a lot of companies over the years that they really have focused on OSHA compliance. And then when HIPAA really became a thing over the last 10 years, they started adding that in, and they say, hey, we do OSHA and HIPAA. They are completely different animals. And one of the things that I've seen out there, which really kind of bothers me, is that I'll see these companies that say, hey, because the HIPAA guideline only has that one sentence and it doesn't really tell you how to do a risk assessment, go online, take a 10-minute questionnaire, and boom, you've done a risk assessment. If you ever were to do something like that and got audited, they will laugh you out of there before they fine you up the wazoo. So that is not going to cut it. To me, that is like seeing a patient based solely on their medical and dental history forms and nothing else. You've got to look. When we do a risk assessment for a client, the process takes somewhere between 5 to 8 hours. We don't need you there for more than 5 or 10 minutes of that, but it is a very thorough process. And what it should generate is that HIPAA's version of a treatment plan called the HIPAA management plan. If you're ever audited, that's really what they want to see. Do you have a management plan, and have you started to address some of the issues on there? And if you haven't, that is potentially bad news. This is just to show you how we do it for our clients. This is the risk assessment. The software uses some algorithm to figure out the risk score. I'm not sure exactly how they do it. We've done it for hundreds of clients over the years. We've never had anyone that had less than a 90 on initial presentation to us. But what we get then is this full risk assessment that goes through everything that they found. You look at generic logins and password policies and domain administrators and unsupported operating systems, and whether your spyware is up to date, and do you have users that are no longer in the practice and aren't using their accounts, and the list goes on and on. Typically, our risk assessment is about 10 pages long, and our management plan is about 8 to 9 pages long. And this is what the management plan would look like, where it would show you, the different things that we found, what computers, had the issues, what HIPAA law applies to it. And again, this is something that we do for our clients. If you haven't done this on your own and haven't done it for years, we don't recommend doing your own risk assessment and doing your own mitigation plans, because there's just so many minutia that you just wouldn't know how to handle. So it really should be something that an expert is handling for you. So what are the things that I think you need to do right now? This is like my basics 101 steps to take right now. We've gone through a lot of this stuff as already. You must do an annual risk assessment. I guess you can make the argument that, hey, we did a risk assessment, nothing has changed. We have the same staff, the same software, the same everything. I suppose you can make the argument of doing it once every 18 months or 24 months. But as I said, when we do it for our clients, we actually offer to do it on a quarterly basis, just because usually you have such a long list of things that you need to address. You want to make sure you're staying on top of those things. So we do an annual risk assessment, and then we'll update that every 3 or 4 months. We'll find additional issues. We'll find things that weren't handled. It's an ongoing process here. We've never done a quarterly risk assessment review for a client and found nothing. There's always something there. Now, a lot of times it's a very small list, but there's always going to be something. So you need to do that risk assessment. And if it's done properly, it should generate a HIPAA management plan as well, their version of a treatment plan. You have to have this in place. If you're ever audited, they don't expect that you're going to get to all 9 pages of that list on day one. What they want to see is that you've made a good faith effort to get started. I would caution you that even though a HIPAA risk assessment and a management plan is the law, don't do it if you're not going to do anything about it, because that's actually worse. If you're ever audited and they see that you did the risk assessment, you've got the plan, but you never lifted a finger to do anything about it, that is what's called, what's the term they use? It's willful neglect is the term that they use, meaning you knew about this and you chose not to do anything. that's when you start to see some of these huge multi-million-dollar fines and settlements. They don't take kindly to that. So if you're going to do a risk assessment,
it's one of the rare examples of ignorance being in your favor, ignorance of the law.
Well, except that you still have to do it. So it's like you're between a rock and a hard place, because if they ever show up and they say, show us your risk assessment, and you're like, I don't have one, it goes downhill quickly, really quickly. So, but as I said, it would definitely be worse if you have done that and you never did anything about it. So for most of our clients, when we get around to actually dealing with the things that we find on the risk assessment, it's around 8 to 10 hours of labor, give or take, to handle everything on there. We can crank it out in a day or two. Most offices want us to do like an hour or two every week or so. We do it after hours. So, it still takes a number of weeks to get it completed. But make sure you're committed, because most IT companies don't do that for free. You're going to pay for that 8 to 10 hours of labor, but be committed to it, get it done, and you'll be a lot happier in the long run. You really should have a policies and procedure manual. I would caution you, if you ever bought one from the ADA, a lot of people bought the ADA manual, they stuck it on their shelf, and they never even cracked the plastic on it. If you do crack the plastic, what you'll see is that it's not really a manual, it's a template. And there's a lot of stuff that you need to fill in. It's going to take you weeks, if not months, to fill all that stuff in. So you actually do need to do that. When we do our risk assessments and management plans for our clients, we provide them a customized policies and procedure manual. We've never seen anyone that's been dinged by an auditor because they didn't have a proper manual. They want to see that you have it. They're not going to go through it page by page and point by point to make sure that it meets certain criteria. You just have to have it, and it has to be current. As I mentioned, you really want to have some type of cyber liability insurance, at least $250,000, but many of our clients are now getting more. Encryption, again, I don't think there's a good excuse for not being encryption. You need to encrypt your server. You really should only have data on your server, because by law, you're supposed to encrypt all your patient data. You're supposed to back up all your data. The reality is most dental offices don't keep all their data on the server. The dentist oftentimes has patient photos on their workstation. The office manager might have EOBs or things on her workstation. So those ones need to be encrypted as well. Or ideally, you set up a shortcut to the server. You put that shortcut on each person's desktop, and they save their files to that. So even though it looks like it's on their desktop, it's actually being saved to the server. It's actually being backed up as well. That's an easier solution. Speaking about encryption, you need to be doing encrypted email as well. There's a ton of good programs out there. Most of them will allow you to keep your existing email address. You don't need to switch. And again, these are not horribly expensive programs. Usually $8 to $10 per user per month for a good encrypted email system. We like ones from AppRiver, from SecureMail, Google. Their paid version, not the free one, but the paid version. I think it's called Google. It was G Drive. I think they just changed the name again to like Google for Workplace or something like that. That's decent as well. But you really should be using some type of encrypted email system. You really need a backup and disaster recovery system. I think this is critical for offices. This is the thing that's going to save your bacon if you ever get hit with ransomware. If you suffer a fire, flood, or something like that, you need to have a backup that's offsite as well. Network monitoring, patch management. The patch management part is a HIPAA law. The software that we use, this remote management and monitoring, also allows us to monitor your network. It'll let us know if you got hit with a virus. It'll let us know if a hard drive is corrupted or getting full. It can do maintenance type procedures like defragmenting the hard drives or cleaning out the temporary internet files. There's no law that says you have to do those things. There is a law that says you have to do the patch management, and it's the same software, so why not take advantage of all the other things that it can do as well? Most of us in IT were what's called MSPs, managed service providers. And that's just a fancy way of saying automation. That we, a lot of the stuff that we do, the software does the work for us, because it will cost you a fortune to have us to do this manually for you. So it's actually very cost effective in the long run. You should have antivirus software in place, third party. Microsoft, all versions of Windows, at least Windows 10, 11, have a built-in antivirus called Defender. It is mediocre at best. All those 400 offices in Wisconsin that were hit with ransomware, they all had Defender, and every one of them got hit with ransomware. So, it's take it with a grain of salt. You definitely wanted some antivirus software, but supplement that with some type of ransomware protection as well. We talked about this, as I think this is the one thing, and again, you can't sort of look at this in a vacuum. It doesn't make sense to do just application whitelisting, but not have a firewall or not have a backup in place. I mean, it's a process here. You can't just do one without the others. You can't. Someone comes into your practice with an endodontically involved tooth. It's not enough just to do the endo. You got to do a post build up. You got to put a crown on it. You may need to do some crown length. I mean, all the things you need to do. That's all part of that process. But if you're on an unbelievably limited budget and said, "Hey, I'm going to do one thing for my practice to protect me from ransomware," it would be the application whitelisting that does the ring fencing as well. You really should have a business associate agreement. Anyone that has access to your data, that's not part of the care of the patient. So, for example, labs, referring offices, those are not business associates. But Dentrix, Open Dental, your IT company, your backup company, your email provider, all of those, because they have potential access to your data, you need to have a signed business associates agreement with them. If you have one that's really old, you need to update it because they changed the way that the agreements need to be written as of 2013. So as long as you've had one within the last 8 years, you're okay. But if it's an older than that, you're going to need to update it. You'll need to do some staff training as well. There's a bunch of ones that we recommend. By the way, I'll send out after the webinar, I'll send out a link to everyone, so some of the ones that we recommend for online training for your staff as well. You should be, like I said, you should be doing two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. That means that any website that you visit that allows it, it's not enough just to have a password and a username that you enter. It should then, when you enter that, it should send you a code either to your cell phone preferably or maybe to your email address as well, that you have to enter that second code in order to get on the site. You definitely want to do it for secure sites like your bank and credit card company, insurance companies. I think Amazon offers this as well. I don't personally happen to use it for Amazon, but if they offer it, you probably should use it. It's not a bad idea. So I mentioned this at the beginning, is that I want to make a few offers to everyone that's on here this evening because you're people that I know or people that Danny knows, and I want to make a few offers. The first is what we call a security audit or a technical audit. This is not a formal risk assessment. Like I said, those risk assessments take 5 to 8 hours, but every practice that we first start working with, we do this technical or security audit. It's kind of designed to be that 30,000-foot view from above, where we can get an idea, what are you doing for backup? What type of anti-malware protection do you have in place? Have you done a risk assessment? Do you have encryption? All things that we talked about, we would be able to evaluate that. And that process usually takes about 30 minutes or so for us to gather that data. Typically, I charge $97 for that. I'm waiving that fee. It's $0. I actually had the wrong date here. We decided to do it good through November 15th. So I apologize. When I was making the slide initially, I was going to do it for a month, but it's going to be a little bit short because we get super busy towards the end of the year. Most of you are probably familiar with Schedule 179, where you can deduct hardware expenses all at once versus expensing it over the lifetime of the hardware. So for my business, November, December are far and away the busiest months of the year. So we are going to make this offer through November 15th. And the way that you can take advantage of that is by going to my website, which is thediginaldentist.com. I'll show you a screenshot of that in a second. I am also offering free IT consulting. And again, it's going to be through November 15th because we do get busy. This is basically, if you want to pick my brain, if you want to say, hey, Lorne, I want more information. I'm not sure if we're doing enough. Hey, I've got an IT guy, but I'm not sure if they're really doing everything they should be. Can I talk to you? Or maybe you're planning a new practice, or you're expanding your practice, or you're buying a remote office, satellite practice, and you want to pick my brain. I don't charge for that time. I usually do, but again, I'm happy to waive that for anyone that's on the webinar this evening. This is what you would do. You go to my website, which is thediginaldentist.com. You fill out the complimentary consultation form, your name, the practice name, email, and phone number. It sends an email to my office manager. She will follow up. She'll have maybe just a couple of questions. Hey, what specifically do you have questions about? She'll schedule a time for us to talk, and we go from there. The third thing, as I mentioned, is that you really should have an up-to-date business associates agreement with anyone that has access to your data. I have a form that we use, a template. I am going to send that out to everyone who was on the call this evening. I'll get the list from Danny. Make sure you all get a copy of that as well. There are a number of ways that you can get a hold of me. As I said, you can go to the website, which is thediginaldentist.com. You can email me directly at drlavine@thediginaldentist.com. It's Lavine with an A. You can call our toll-free number, 866-204-3398, extension 200. If you call in the next few days, leave a message because my office manager is on vacation. Apparently, we have to give our employees vacation, so I'm just kidding. She's gone for a few days, but everything comes through to me as an email attachment, so I'll see any calls that come through, and I'll be able to follow up with you personally.
I know Candace loves you, Lauren.
Yeah, she does love me. She just got engaged, so I guess she's got an excuse to take a vacation. So I'm happy to take any questions that you've seen, Danny, and I'll put the offers up there as well. I'll leave this on here for people that have any information, want more information, and the website that they can go to. So hit me. What do you got?
Yeah, we got a lot, Lauren, but you gave us a lot. I wanted to really thank you. You packed a lot in a very short period of time.
I know when I showed you the presentation, you're like, Lauren, this looks like it's longer than an hour. Are you sure you can be able to squeeze it in? I was like, yeah, I know I can.
You did. You kind of nailed it right on the button. I should have known. Well, this isn't your first rodeo. You also told me that.
Yeah, that's a few of these. Yeah.
You didn't have to. We've actually done some talks together over the past several years. Climb for a Cause 08, Mount Marcy. I don't know if you remember that, but I bet you do.
08? It was 98 was our first. Well, no, 08 I remember as well. I remember that's when didn't you break your ankle or something on that one?
No, we had another incident, but we won't
okay.
that. But
I remember you tripped or something happened.
98 was our first Climb for a Cause. You were on it. That's how we really got to know each other. Like you said, 3 days in a tent, you get to know a person. And 08 was our first climb east of the Rockies, and that was in New York State. You were on that one.
Yep.
We spoke there, and with Bill Blatchford, lots of other people. It was great, and you continue to be a very generous individual. You continue to support Climb for a Cause, which we always appreciate, are grateful, and you demonstrate.
It's a great cause. Always happy.
Well, thank you. We do feel very passionate about oral health education and treatment, largely overseas and domestically. And I appreciate the generous offers you made. I know you do get really crazy busy at the end of the year, so I don't at all. I certainly understand you wanting to delay or shorten that.
Yeah, we want to. Obviously, I'm always happy to speak to people. I'm always happy to help. It's just my time becomes so limited towards the end of the year that I want to give people a kind of an incentive to say, hey, the offer's for free time. I'm happy to do it. It's still, let's say, the 27th. You still got like almost 3 weeks to contact us. As long as you contacted us before the 15th, it doesn't make a difference if we don't get it scheduled until after that date. The offer still applies to anyone after that date. It's just a matter of contacting us to at least get you on the schedule. That's all that we're asking.
Oh, that's even better. Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, well, let's dive into questions. We got a lot of them. My IT guy installed antivirus software and says I'm protected. Is she wrong?
Well, you have some level of protection. As I said, every antivirus program works. Unless it's really bad or someone wrote it in their garage, but they all work. It's better than having nothing. This is one of those situations where you really want to be wearing suspenders and a belt at the same time. Like in the past, when we used to offer services for clients, we would offer them individually just because we wanted to have it cost effective. And we realized that we're kind of doing people a disservice if we tell them, hey, you just need antivirus software and forget about the firewall, forget about the anti-ransomware, forget about the application whitelisting. We've gotten away from that because we realize that you really kind of need to have a stack. You need to have multiple layers of protection in order to keep your data secure and safe. So having antivirus software, I think, is better than nothing. But if you're trying to keep ransomware out and being able to deal with it if it does get in, I would highly recommend that you supplement that with a firewall, with anti-ransomware protection, and with application whitelisting. If your IT company, by the way, if the IT company, this is the one case where we would do things individually. If your IT company, you're happy with them, they handle all your needs, but they're not really current on HIPAA or cybersecurity, they don't do the application whitelisting, we are more than happy to provide that service individually. And we can work with your IT company. We wouldn't be stepping on their toes. It would just, give you that extra layer of protection. It's one thing that's been kind of surprising to me over the years is that there's probably about a dozen or so really well-known dental IT companies around the country. And we're like one of two that I know of that do risk assessments or that do application whitelists that really kind of focus on cybersecurity and HIPAA. And I'm not sure why that's the case because, like I said, HIPAA is the law of the land. Every dental IT company in my mind really should be very fluent in cybersecurity and HIPAA, but that just hasn't been our experience. And again, it's not meant to be a knock against other people. It's just, this is where we've specialized. And just like, you don't typically, a lot of general dentists don't do their own ortho, their own third molar extractions, their own molar endos. They send them out. So same thing here, where we kind of see, even though we do computers and networks and we do everything, like that any IT company does, but our focus is really on cybersecurity and HIPAA.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for clarifying that, because another question was if you unbundled your services, and so the answer is a yes, which
yeah, we do. We take it individually. As I said, our typical client that comes to us doesn't have an IT person. They might be a new practice. They may just be dissatisfied with their IT people. They're looking for a comprehensive solution. In those cases, we really try to get away from the individual. But we never try to tell someone, hey, it's us or nothing. We learned a long time ago how to play nicely with others. And if you have an IT company that meets some of your needs, that you like having them, but you'd like us to help supplement what they may not be doing, then we're more than happy to work with them and you to get you that. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that people have the peace of mind to sleep well at night, knowing that their data is secure. So, whatever we can do to help in that process, we're more than happy to have that conversation.
Well, let's talk about budget. This attendee asks, how much should a practice budget for IT and cybersecurity? I guess let's talk about cybersecurity and IT separately.
Yeah, well, cybersecurity, again, if you get, and it depends on who you're talking to and what industry you're talking to. So I'm a part of a bunch of Facebook groups, and I talk to a lot of people that have other types of MSP businesses for other industries, a lot of marketing gurus. The going rate for MSPs on a per computer basis, because like I said, normally you want to have a stack of all these different software programs running. The going rate in the industry, believe it or not in the dental industry, is around $250 to $350 per month per computer. That is way above what I would charge, because I just don't think people are willing to spend $3,000 to $4,000 a month on their cybersecurity. Most of our clients, depending, we have like different packages. Most of them are somewhere between $50 to $100 a month per computer. That's kind of like the standard rate that we would charge. As far as ongoing IT, I mean, everyone works differently. Some people charge an ongoing monthly fee, whether you use it or not. We never felt that was fair. So what we do for clients who just want IT support from us is to do a block of time. So you'd buy, say, like a 10-hour block. And normally, most IT companies that I know, and we're in that range, that 10-hour block would be somewhere around $1,000 to $1,500. So around $100 to $150 an hour, give or take. The block is deducted on a per minute basis. So you buy a 10-hour block, you call us up one day, it takes us 20 minutes to resolve the issue. Now you've got 9 hours and 40 minutes left. And we just keep going until you run out of time. We've always thought that was the most fair way, because you're only paying for the time that you use. We have people that go through that block in a month or two. We have people that, 2 years in, they haven't even used up half the time. So every office is unique. But, if you budget, if you want to get really cyber secure and HIPAA compliant, if you budget for most offices, $1,000 to $1,500 a month would not be outrageous. As I said, you can probably find some companies that'll do it for less. You can definitely find some that are going to do it for a lot more than that. But that's kind of like what we see in the industry as kind of industry standard, industry averages. But everyone's unique. Some offices have 2 computers, some have 22, and obviously, you're going to have different budgetary needs depending on the type of office you have.
Very good. Next question is, what questions should I be asking my IT provider?
Well, first and foremost, because we've seen so many of these attacks that hit IT companies, your first question should be, do you guys have a portal for remotely accessing our computers? And hopefully the answer is yes, because almost all of us do. And if so, have you set up some type of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication? That is, to me, like the biggest red flag if they don't have that 2FA in place, because that basically means anyone can get in. You also want to find out what type of remote software they're using. You don't want to use a remote access program or have them use a remote access program that requires them to open up a port on the router or the firewall. A lot of companies, a lot of software companies, they'll tell you, hey, we need to be able to have our technicians access your system, so, open up this port. Don't. Say, sorry, no, you got to provide some other system. That is a huge security risk to have open ports on your firewall. You don't want to be doing that. You want to make sure that the remote access software that the IT company is using is HIPAA compliant. Part of the requirements are that it audits and logs, that who accessed your system and when do they access it and what do they do with it. It has to be encrypted. You have to have what's called automatic shutoff, that if someone's accessing your computers remotely, if they walk away from their desk after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it should cut the connection. Otherwise, it's open all day long that anyone can walk over and access your systems. So things like that. Obviously, you want to ask them, how many dental offices do you have as clients? Do you work with other industries? Because ideally, and again, this is not designed to sound self-serving, but ideally, I think dental offices should be working with a company that really specializes in at least healthcare, if not dental specifically. There's just too much to know when it comes to HIPAA and cybersecurity that someone who works in 10 different industries would not have that level of information.
Very good. What specifically is your company doing to prevent breaches of the kind practices and or the IT firms, I'd say, but they said the kinds that practices in Wisconsin, Seattle, Dallas, et cetera, experienced. But you being an IT company, which is a window or a door to many other practices, that the question is kind of what is the digital dentist doing?
Yeah, basically everything I just said, they should be asking their IT company to do. We do have a portal. It's a secure portal. We've had two-factor authentication set up for years. So we had it long before this became national news. Everything is encrypted. We use secure connections. It's audited. It's logged. We can show people if they ever ask us, show us how you do. We can actually, do a screen share and show them how we have actually accessed their systems. We do risk assessments that we can provide to our clients on a yearly basis, because your business associates, the people that access your data, they should be doing risk assessments as well. So we do annual risk assessments. We use encrypted email systems. We use secure remote access software. Trying to think what else. We do all the things that we don't, we practice what we preach. We do the same thing that we did. We have application whitelisting. We've had it for months before we started offering to our clients. We wanted to make sure that it worked. I got ransomware protection. We've got all that stuff in place. So, it's it's not enough to just preach or talk about it. You have to actually walk the walk and talk the talk.
That's right. Well, I think this attendee just wanted that reassurance, which you have given.
Sure. Probably one of my clients that just wanted to remain anonymous.
I don't know. We just got another one, which I'll paraphrase. It's along the lines of feeling like he's been hit by a fire hose. Head is reeling. I will call you or email. Need to calm down first. Great webinar otherwise.
Thank you.
So you have that effect on people.
Yeah. It is overwhelming. The problem is that in the industry, in the dental field, I feel that there's so little information being provided to dentists by the organizations that we typically would depend on. The American Dental Association, your state dental societies, they just aren't up on this stuff, and they should be giving guidance. They should be sending out emails weekly or monthly newsletters or something, constantly getting people on board with this. Well, of course, we'd be thrilled to have that endorsement, but it's not critical for us. We got plenty of clients, and we always got room for more. But
I'm not saying you need it.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. This is why, and again, we try to tell people, we do have people that come to us and say, listen, I get what you do. I know this valuable. I just, I don't want to spend the money. I want to look for a cheap way to do it on my own. And we say, listen, I'm happy to help you and give you some guidance. It's not so much how you set it up, because most people can probably figure out how to get it. Well, the application whitelisting, you'll never figure out how to set that up on your own. But everything else, most people have the ability to install a ransomware software. They have the ability to at least install a firewall. They don't know how to configure it, but they can at least get it installed and set up. The real challenge comes for the maintenance and the ongoing monitoring. It's not enough. It's not a set it and forget it type of scenario. It's constant. Your backup needs to be monitored every single day. We have, I think around 250 clients backups that we're monitoring every single day. We get a report. And on a typical day, there's 8 to 12 that have failed for one reason or another. Their internet was down, their local drive was disconnected. I mean, there's stuff that can happen. So we're on top of it. But that's what we're here for. Is listen, most dental offices, if you're your own IT guy, you are wasting your very valuable time, which should be spent chairside on stuff that you can pay people for. And trust me, no matter what we charge, it's nowhere near what most dental offices are charging on an hourly basis to do dental work. So it's not cost effective to be your own IT guy. I think there's
unless you're deriving great satisfaction from doing it. The theory, speaking as an economist or having been trained in economics, the theory of comparative advantage says you should do what you are most best at, and you might be even if you're better than your IT guy, you're a lot better dentist than he or she is, and it's all about peace of mind. So you've already abundantly answered one question we got, which is, can I do this on my own? And the answer is yes, but, and everything you just said and shared.
You can try. That's it. And we're happy to give you that push. We'll tell you what products to get and what services to look at and all that stuff. And we'll even set it up for if you want. We charge for our time for that. But as I said, having a backup isn't really good if you're not monitoring it, if you don't do the test restores that Hipaa says you have to do, if you're not verifying the backup on a regular basis, you're going to get that surprise where 3 years later, your server goes down and you realize that your backup, even though the software says it was running, it hasn't worked for 2 years, and you never knew that. So unless you really know how to diagnose and troubleshoot, unfortunately, I'd be concerned that you might be shooting yourself in the foot in the long run.
Mm-hmm. This attendee,
but of course, I'm not trying to be self-serving. I mean, that's just the reality of what we see.
Mm-hmm. If our data is not in the cloud, does that lessen the exposure to ransomware?
No, I think the exposure risk is always there. Email is, like I said, the number one way that people get a ransomware virus. That someone in your office clicks on an email attachment they thought was from a patient or thought it was a good email and it wasn't. Unpatched operating system would be number two. There's lots of ways that ransomware can get in there. We're seeing more and more where ransomware is just out in the wild, and they just look for open ports on the routers, and it wasn't anything that you or your staff did. That someone just started looking at IP addresses and started trying to find open ports. Kind of flipping that question around is that one of my pet peeves is that we hear people that have cloud-based software, and one of the big sales pitches from these companies is, hey, if you go cloud-based, you don't need to worry about Hipaa, and you don't need to worry about cybersecurity because everything's up in the cloud. And I touched on this earlier. The problem is that, a lot of your data is in the practice management software, but not all of it. And there are 18 different identifiers. And if there's patient name, a chart ID, a date of birth, an address, at that point, it is considered electronic protected health information and must be dealt with as such. So even if you have a cloud-based software, unless everything is cloud-based, your emails, your images, your QuickBooks, your Invisalign, all your documents and spreadsheets, everything is cloud-based, which we've never seen. I mean, everyone has something on their computers. If you have just that one piece of information, then that means you need a server, you need to worry about Hipaa, you need to worry about encryption, you need to worry about backup, all that stuff still applies. So for those of you who are using cloud-based systems, and you don't have a server or you're not doing all the other stuff you should be doing, I'm happy to have that conversation with you because you may be at a higher risk than you think you are.
Can your clients really rely on your service to notify them of a breach or ransomware attack?
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work. we do get those. Yes, that's
in
what
other words,
it's designed to
you'll
do.
you'll find out before they do, and then your response. I guess I'm just kind of interpreting here what they're asking.
Right. Well, so let's say someone's got the application whitelisting in place. What'll happen is that the program will try to run, and they will notice it first because on whatever computer that it's on, there'll be that pop-up screen that I showed earlier where it says, hey, this program's requesting information. You would send that to us. Now, when we get that, we would know within a few seconds, hey, this should not be running. We're not going to give you, we're not going to clear this program for use because it's definitely ransomware. A lot of them are stopping their tracks because they're already in the database. In other words, a lot of the existing ransomware, a lot of the existing viruses are already in the application whitelisting database. It's going to stop it before it even tries to run. You get like a pop-up that says, hey, we could not find this file, or we could not, that you don't have permission to access it or something along those lines. But yeah, that's the way our software works. Again, we use portals, for our ESET, which is our antivirus software. We have a portal, and like I said, we've got close to 1,500 computers that have that on there. And every day we can look at that portal. First thing in the morning, it'll tell us, hey, there was, this one was attacked by a virus, or this one, the virus is out of date, the software's out of date, or whatever the case is. I would say, and this is why I'm such a big proponent of the application whitelisting, that in the 6 months or so that we've been doing application whitelisting for our clients, we have not seen a single virus hit any one of our clients at all, 0 in 6 months. And I can promise you that was not the case before we started using that software. It was almost on a weekly basis. So that's why I'm so high on this, that it literally prevents any virus from running. That's about as good as it gets. But I'm still not suggesting you do that and not have a firewall or anti-ransomware protection in place, because like I said, you want to have those different layers and levels of protection, because nothing's infallible. Even though we haven't found anything that's gotten through the application whitelisting yet, it doesn't mean it's impossible. So you really want to make sure it never gets on in the first place, but that you can deal with it if it does.
Very good. And our last question that we have time for was actually a couple of people asked this in different ways. You being a Canuck, you'll probably like this question. Are there any compliance differences for Canada-based practices?
Yeah, so here we have Hipaa. In Canada, they have PIPEDA, P-I-P-E-D, as all the Canadian people know. A lot of the stuff with Hipaa is similar with PIPEDA, but there are obviously some differences as well. I am not a PIPEDA expert. We do have a number of Canadian clients. What we have found is that almost all the things that we do for our clients are going to get them more compliant with Canadian laws as well. There may be some additional things, like, for example, I think one of my clients was telling me that when it comes to backing up your data, that if you're not going to back it up in Canada, there's some certain requirements that you have to have as far as where the server is or what type of precautions you have in place. We've already addressed that. So we are able to offer backup for our Canadian clients, but there's other things like that that may not be part of HIPAA. But the concepts are still the same. You still, if you encrypt everything, if you're backing it up, if you're securing and protecting your data, you're going to be meeting the criteria of any country that has data protection laws. But there's no, being HIPAA compliant would not really. There's no HIPAA in Canada. It's just their version, the PIPEDA, that people need to be aware of.
Got it. Well, I want to thank you again, Lorne, for an information-packed presentation. It was great. A lot of information. I know it can seem overwhelming at times, but that's why you're offering the opportunity to meet one-on-one with anyone who's interested in doing so, as long as they'll get back in touch with you within a reasonable period of time. And at this point, I would like to invite everyone to mark their calendars for Thursday, November 18th at 6 p.m. Central Time, when my special guest will be Ms. Kathy Devereaux, whose expertise lies in getting payments for dentists from the IRS. So I guess Canadian dentists are out of luck in this respect. But her event is aptly entitled, "The IRS Has Your Money. You Need Only Ask for It. 2 little-known but totally legal ways to receive up to $500,000 from Uncle Sam." Most dentists are unaware that they may legally receive large cash payments by completing a simple qualifying application, which is why Kathy has taken up the mantle and committed herself to ensuring dentists receive every penny to which they are entitled for simply doing what they already do. In recognition of the holiday season, November's event will only last 1 hour. We've made sure to pack Kathy's presentation with everything you need to apply to receive to your payments from the IRS. It all happens on Thursday, November 18th at 6 p.m. Central. Until then, this is Danny Bobrow, thanking you as always for your ongoing commitment to practice perfection, and thanking you once again for a wonderful presentation, Lauren.
Thank you, Danny. And I would encourage people to go to that presentation in November. She's probably going to talk about the research and development credit, which is something I've done and a lot of our clients have done as well. And she's accurate. There's a lot of money on the table that Dennis can easily get. So I highly encourage people to attend that webinar. I think it's going to be very informative.
Thanks for that endorsement. It's also for the employee retention credit. So there's two different programs that you can apply for. So thank you for that, Lauren, and thanks everybody. Have a great holiday season. We'll see you in November. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Danny. Good night, everyone.